the domestication of dogs. Picture this. It's the late Pleistocene era. Somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago, humans are hunter-gatherers living in small groups, relying on cooperation, communication, and ingenuity to survive brutal Ice Age conditions. Just beyond the firelight, wolves linger, not as enemies, but not yet as companions. Today, dogs are woven into nearly every human culture. They assist police and military units, detect diseases, guide people who are blind, and provide emotional support. But this relationship didn't emerge overnight. Today, we're exploring the scientific evidence behind dog domestication, genetics, archeology, evolutionary biology, and animal behavior, all to answer one question: how did wolves become dogs? Segment 1. Wolves and humans before domestication. Okay, so to understand dogs, we need to start with gray wolves, the direct ancestor of domestic dogs. Modern wolves are highly social, cooperative hunters that live in family-based packs. They rely on sophisticated communication systems involving vocalizations, facial expressions, and body posture. These traits made wolves unusually compatible with humans, who also depend heavily on social cooperation. Importantly, both species occupied similar ecological niches. Humans and wolves hunted the same prey, large herbivores like reindeer and bison, and followed migratory patterns across vast landscapes. This overlap created competition, but it also created opportunity. So dogs and wolves belong to the family Canidae, from which the term canine is derived from. So this genealogical family Canidae emerged about 40 to 45 million years ago in North America. And from what we know, the earliest canids were small, kind of like fox-sized or smaller. They were likely omnivorous. They were tree and ground dwelling, and very different from modern wolves or dogs. And they're grouped into three major evolutionary lineages. Hesperocyaninae, I think I'm saying that right, is one lineage which is now extinct and the earliest which we've been able to find. Next up, we've got the Borophagenes. These were referred to as bone-crushing dogs, and they're now extinct. And the last group are the canines, a lineage that led to wolves, dogs, foxes, and coyotes. Out of all these three groups, the only one to survive to current day are the canines. So, canines. True canines, the ancestors of modern wolves, dogs, and foxes, appeared around 6 to 10 million years ago. The key traits of early canines include longer legs than earlier canids. They have teeth that have adapted for both meat and plant matter. They have increased endurance for long-distance travel and more social tendencies than earlier solitary carnivores. And these animals were generalists. They weren't apex predators. From this early group emerges the genus called Canis, and this includes wolves, dogs, coyotes, jackals, dingoes, etc. These appeared between 5 to 6 million years ago, and these early Canis species likely hunted small to medium prey. They were opportunistic and scavenged quite a lot. They lived in flexible social groups and were behaviorally adaptable rather than highly specialized. And the adaptability is quite crucial. It's one of the reasons that dogs could later domesticate so successfully. And now going back, we are going to the last common ancestor of modern wolves and dogs. And we believe this species lived roughly between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago. And what we think this animal was like was it was wolf-like, but not quite identical to modern gray wolves. They were likely smaller and less specialized. They were behaviorally flexible and more tolerant of variable environments. Importantly, modern wolves are not unchanged ancestors. They evolved after the split as well. So, long before domestication, early Canis species already had traits that made dogs possible, and this includes social cooperation, which within it includes pack living, cooperative hunting, and shared care of youth. Communication, a rich vocal and body language system, and sensitivity to social cues, as well as scavenging ability. So the ability to comfortably feed on leftovers, being tolerant of human presence, and flexible diets. So all these traits existed before humans entered the picture, but these traits primed the species to be easily domesticated alongside hunter-gatherer humans. So there were certain cognitive traits that existed in canines before dogs existed. And certain evidence suggests that early canines had strong spatial memory, the ability for problem solving, the ability to learn through observation, and sensitivity to hierarchy and social rules. So dogs didn't invent these traits, or these traits weren't invented and put onto dogs. Rather, these traits existed in canines and they were amplified. There is a claim that climate change kind of set the stage for canines to adapt to living alongside humans. So this claim suggests that the late Ice Age was ecologically unstable. It was marked by shifting prey populations, and it was dangerous for specialists. In an environment that is changing so quickly, any kind of specialty becomes eroded quite quick. Flexible species like early Canis thrived. When humans appeared as predictable, mobile sources of food and protection, some canines took advantage of that. Here's what we don't know. What we don't know is whether domestication happened once and kind of spread from one individual source, or whether it happened multiple times in different locations throughout history. We don't know the exact geographical origin for these domestication events, or how many early dog-like lineages went extinct. So there's genetic evidence that suggests many early dog lineages may have vanished, leaving only one dominant domesticated lineage today. There was a study by Ovidov et al. In 2011, and it suggested that possible origins of dogs emerged quite further back than we originally thought, and much deeper into the Ice Age. And it introduced the idea of an incipient dog. These dogs were claimed to be canines that were part way to becoming dogs, but hadn't quite made it all the way to resembling modern ones. So, from all this, what can we take away? It's that dogs didn't come from wolves that suddenly changed. They came from a long line of adaptable, social, intelligent canines already primed to live alongside humans. By the time humans arrived, canines were already halfway to becoming dogs. Segment 2, the self-domestication hypothesis. So for decades, the dominant theory was that humans intentionally captured wolf pups and raised them. However, modern research strongly supports a different model, self-domestication. According to this hypothesis, some wolves began scavenging near human campsites, feeding on discarded bones and food waste. Wolves that were less aggressive and more tolerant of human presence had a survival advantage. And over many generations, natural selection favored traits such as reduced fear and aggression towards humans, increased sociability, and a greater ability to interpret human cues. So this process mirrors a famous Russian fox domestication experiment where selecting foxes solely for tameness led to a lot of physical changes such as floppy ears, curled tails, and altered coat colors over a few generations. The Trut, Oskina, and Karlamova paper from 2009 summarizes one of the most influential experiments in evolutionary biology because it shows through experiment how domestication can happen and how behavior, biology, and appearance are deeply linked. So what they asked was, what happens when you, or if you select animals only for tameness towards humans, not for size, not for intelligence, not for coat color, just reduced fear and aggression? So their experiment, Domestication of Foxes. And this experiment was based on the Russian silver fox experiment started in 1959. And the way it worked was these researchers took wild silver foxes bred for fur. Each generation, they selected only the foxes that were calm and friendly towards humans. No training, no socialization, just selective breeding based on disposition towards humans. And the goal was to mimic what might happen during early animal domestication. So the results. Behavior changed first. So within a few generations, foxes began to approach humans willingly, wag their tails, whimper, and seek attention. Also show reduced stress hormones. This alone was remarkable. It showed that tameness evolved extremely fast. Now, the shock was that physical changes appeared as well. Even though researchers never selected for physical traits, the foxes began to develop floppy ears, curled tails, shorter snouts, smaller teeth, patchy or lighter coat colors, and longer juvenile periods. And these traits are classic features seen in domestic dogs, pigs, and other domestic animals compared to their wild counterparts. The combination of these changes is called domestication syndrome. So why did physical traits change? In 2009, BioEssay's paper explains that selecting for tameness affects neural crest cells, a group of embryonic cells that contribute towards facial structure, ear cartilage, pigmentation, adrenal glands, which have to do with a stress response. And when neural crest development is altered, animals became less fearful, their stress responses weakened, their physical features changed as a side effect. And this links behavior, hormones, and anatomy into one process. So why does this matter for dogs? So the fox experiment shows that you don't need intentional breeding for looks. Selecting for friendliness alone can reshape an animal, and domestication can happen quickly and unintentionally. Applied to dogs, we can make the link that early wolves that tolerated humans survived better near camps. Tameness led to both behavioral and physical dog traits, and humans didn't need to plan domestication. It may have emerged naturally in symbiosis. Segment 3, genetic evidence. So genetics provides some of the strongest evidence for early dog domestication. The Axelsson et al. Paper from 2013 is one of the most important genetic studies on dog domestication because it provided direct molecular evidence that dogs adapted to life with humans before agriculture was fully established. So what question were these researchers asking? They wanted to know what genetic changes distinguish dogs from wolves, and what do these changes tell us about how dogs were domesticated? So in particular, they were curious about whether dogs evolved traits that helped them live alongside humans, not just behaviorally, but biologically. So the team compared whole genomes of domestic dogs with whole genomes of gray wolves. And they looked for genes that differed consistently between dogs and wolves. And they look for signs of positive selection. So genes that spread because they provided a survival advantage. Now, this is important because it moves beyond bones and behavior and into hard genetic evidence. So this big discovery from this study was starch digestion genes. What the study found was that dogs have a much greater ability to digest starch than wolves. Specifically, dogs have many more copies of a gene called AMY2B, which produces amylase, an enzyme that breaks down starch into sugar. For hard numbers, wolves have 2 copies of this gene, whereas dogs have between 4 and 30, and this varies by breed. So the more copies means the more enzymes means better starch digestion. What's the big deal with starch? Why is this important? So wolves are primarily carnivores. Starch digestion is not a wolf specialty. So this raised the crucial question, why would dogs evolve the ability to digest starch unless they were eating human food? The answer suggests that early dogs were consuming human leftovers. These leftovers included roots, tubers, grains, and cooked plant material. And dogs that could digest these foods had a survival advantage. And this fits perfectly with the self-domestication scavenger hypothesis. So, one of the most important implications of the study is that the genetic changes in these canines predated agriculture. So at this point in time, humans were still hunter-gatherers, but even hunter-gatherers produced starchy wastes. So dogs didn't quite wait for farms, they adapted to human campsites. This pushed dog domestication much earlier than previous theories had suggested. So what were other genes they identified? This study found that selection in genes related to brain development, neural signaling, learning and memory, as well as stress and fear responses. Together, these genes suggest dogs evolved greater behavioral flexibility, reduced fear and aggression, and improved ability to learn from humans. In other words, they became better companions. Segment 4, archaeological evidence. Archaeology adds an emotional dimension to the science. One of the oldest confirmed dog burials dates to around 14,200 years ago in Bonn Oberkassel in Germany, where a dog was buried alongside 2 humans. And analysis of the dog's teeth indicates it was sick and cared for, suggested emotional attachment rather than just utility. Other sites across Eurasia and the Middle East reveal dog remains buried with grave goods, ochre pigments, and careful positioning, practices usually reserved for humans. This tells us that by this point, dogs were already socially integrated into human communities. Segment 5, coevolution and mutual benefits. So dog domestication wasn't a one-sided process, it was coevolution. Dogs offered humans improved hunting success through tracking and endurance running. They offered early warning systems against predators and rival groups, as well as assistance with guarding resources and camps. And humans offered dogs reliable food sources, protection, and medical care and social bonding. Research suggests that humans living with dogs may have experienced evolutionary advantages themselves, including reduced stress and improved survival rates in harsh environments. Segment 6, why dogs are so good at understanding humans. So dogs possess cognitive abilities that are rare among non-human animals. Studies show that dogs outperform chimpanzees and wolves in interpreting human pointing gestures, gaze direction, and vocal tone. A 2005 paper from Trends in Cognitive Sciences by Hare and Tomasello is a cornerstone in understanding why dogs are so good at reading humans. So it reframed dog intelligence not as raw problem-solving power, but as social cognition shaped by domestication. So here's what the paper argued. At the time, a puzzle in animal cognition research was this: why are dogs better than apes at understanding human communication, even though apes are more closely related to us? So chimpanzees share far more DNA resemblance with humans than dogs do, yet dogs consistently outperform chimps in tasks involving human gestures. So Hare and Tomasello wanted to explain why. They compared 2 hypotheses and contrasted their competing explanations. One of them being the general intelligence hypothesis with the domestication hypothesis. So the general intelligence hypothesis claims that animals that are more intelligent overall should perform better at understanding humans. So if this were true, chimpanzees should outperform dogs in these cognitive studies, studying for their ability to understand human gestures. And the domestication hypothesis claimed that animals selected for cooperation with humans evolved specialized social cognitive skills. And if this were true, dogs should outperform chimpanzees and wolves in human-focused tasks. The key evidence they reviewed. So the paper synthesizes results from many experiments, especially object choice tasks. What is an object choice task? An experimenter hides food in one of two containers. The human then points, gazes, or gestures towards the correct container, and the animal must infer where the food is. The surprising results were that dogs reliably followed human pointing and gaze. Chimpanzees often failed or ignored the cues. Wolves raised by humans performed worse than dogs. And human toddlers performed similarly to dogs. So this shows dogs aren't just learning cues through training. They treat human gestures as communicative, not accidental. So what do dogs do differently? Hare and Tomasello highlighted that dogs look to humans for information. They assume that humans are trying to help. They engage in shared attention, and they read intentions, not just movements. Chimpanzees, by contrast, focus on physical outcomes. They treat gestures as irrelevant unless they've been trained for them, and they rarely assume cooperative intent. So the authors argued that domestication selected against fear and aggression. It increased attentiveness towards human faces and hands, and it favored dogs that benefited from human guidance. Over generations, this produced dogs with human-oriented cognition. And this explains why dogs outperform even human-raised wolves at these certain tasks. So this paper changed the way we think about intelligence. It helped shift the field of animal intelligence away from asking which animal is smarter toward asking smart at what and for whom. So dogs aren't smarter than apes in general, but they are exceptionally smart about humans. So I guess this was a bit of a scientific love story in that the domestication of dogs is one of the most remarkable examples of natural selection driven by cooperation rather than domination. Dogs weren't engineered in laboratories or farms. They evolved alongside us, shaped by shared environments, mutual benefits, and emotional connection. So when your dog curls up beside you, you're not just seeing a pet, you're witnessing the results of tens of thousands of years of shared evolutionary history. And with that, here's my painting of a dog.